I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years. But I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be Stageworthy. If you want to support the work that I do on Stageworthy, you can do that by leaving a tip, either as a one-time thing or on a recurring monthly basis. Your support helps me cover the cost of making this show, helps expand the show, and more. You can find a link to the digital tip jar in the show notes, which you can find on your podcast app or at the website at stageworthy.ca. Now, on to the show. My guest this week is Curtis Campbell. Curtis is a writer and theatre artist based in Toronto. He joined me to talk about Gay for Pay with Blake and Clay at the Streetcar Crow's Nest from November 16th to 27th, growing up in a town with no theatre program at school, promoting theatre in a rapidly changing media landscape, and much more. Here's our conversation. Curtis, welcome to Stageworthy. Thanks so much for giving me some of your time today. So you describe yourself as a writer and theater artist. One of the things I describe myself as a performer. Other people describe themselves as a theater maker, theater artist. To you, what does theater artist mean?
It means I don't want to spend a good 5 minutes divulging every last bit of detail about the many things I am forced to do in this industry. So I sum it all up with theater artist. Because you don't need to know that I spent last night sending out a bunch of press releases because I'm kind of like ostensibly the producer of the thing, you know? Like, it's not really fun to listen to. I think theater artist is a lovely umbrella term. For the most part, for me, it just means I write and direct my own theater.
When did you? This is. I think it's become a very necessary part of everyone's theater arsenal. The need to create your own work. For you, what first drove you or sparked the desire to write and create your own work?
Probably the money. Probably the money. There's just so much of it. I oh my goodness. I started writing my own silly little plays when I was in high school. My high school did not have a drama department. So I elected to become the drama department and rule with an iron fist, and discovered a love for ruling with said iron fist. So it all sort of that sort of became it for me.
Why did your school not have a theater program? Like, not even like theater arts, not an English teacher teaching theater, nothing?
No, I'm from a very small town in southwestern Ontario, with a I the little strip of land that I am from is like the if we're on a theater podcast, so we'll name names. Like the Stratford Festival, Blythe Festival, Grand Bend, Playhouse are sort of the theater things going on, but it's very summer stock theater. And the a friend of mine described my high school very aptly once by saying that we were a sports school, but not the sports school, and that's so that stuck with me. And we had one. We had a English/drama teacher who was sort of holding it all together by the time he retired, but by the time I rolled around, that had all gone to shit. I remember the drama room becoming storage for the gym department.
They just decided they weren't even gonna put any effort into it anymore.
No, no, nothing. No, no, nothing. No.
How much of a struggle was it for you to get back into that theater room and to start the theater program or the theater club back up again?
Oh, I did so many things in that theater room that I should not have been doing on school property. But it was interesting. It was one of those. We just sort of started doing it, and we were lucky enough that a um, total ally of a math teacher took pity on us and sort of signed our paperwork. Um, and we just sort of did our own thing, and then we won a bunch of awards and at the formerly known as the Sears Drama Festival. Um, and that was sort of when the administration was like, "Oh, this, I guess this is something." They did sort of take notice of us at that point after we had, of course, proven ourselves able to do it. Um, but it was like just me and my buds and people that I could wrangle into it, just being like, "I wrote a thing, let's do it." Um, and all high school theater is excellent theater, so I really should bring those scripts back one of these days.
I do hear a little bit of sarcasm in your voice. But
I
you were creating those shows at that point. What kind of topics were you dealing with, or were you just like throwing anything at the wall?
No, they were pretty like it was all from a very I remember at the time being very aware of like you would go I remember one of the um we beat Stratford one year at Sears, which they were mad about because who the fuck are these country bumpkins? But the play that they'd done an original play that was a bank robbery. It was like this high stakes thriller about a bank robbery. Um and like police officers, like, a mother of two, written by, like a 17-year-old. And I just remember seeing stuff like that before and being like, I don't know. Like, I don't know about those things. I am 15 years old. I don't know. Um, so we were writing very, or I was writing very things for to perform for my own age. Um, some like fun little sci-fi stuff and some like two-hander um dramas, like real-time two-hander, sort of like gay saltwater moon with swearing. Um you know, just sort of the things that were sparking my interest at the time. But yeah, it was I do remember being that age and being like, it's so fun that you wanted to have a gun on stage, Brad, but I don't know if it holds up. It's a lot of that.
All right. Um, Now you leave high school and you're heading out into the world. Where do you go to study theater? Did you study theater? What was the journey that started you to where you are now?
I went to York University because I could hold that fork, and off I trot to hold that fork at York. And I knew that I wanted a university program that was a theater program. I wasn't overly interested in being sort of locked in any sort of conservatory style thing.
Hmm.
Um, and which is kind of interesting because then you go and if you're a student like me, you're only really able to focus on the immediate things that are of direct interest to you, and so the larger university education that you're getting does sort of fall to the wayside, um unfortunately. But I went to York and met a bunch of really cool people, and kept on that path of like self-producing my own plays. And one day I may stop that and someone else may produce them, but we'll see.
Now I know now York has programs in devised theater and things like that. Was that something they were doing then, or
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
okay?
I did it really was York is you know, a total charcuterie board of good and bad things. But my sort of build it yourself degree was focused on devised theater and playwriting. So those two tracks. So I studied under Judith Rudikoff in the playwriting area of York, and was sort of in that little intense bubble as well.
Um, so here's a question for you. As far as like doing that program, and going to a university rather than a conservatory program. When you left the school, did you feel prepared for the industry, or because I went through a conservatory program that had like a business of acting program and that sort of thing. So I'm curious about the university experience.
Yeah, I mean, York, while I was there, like they really do value the prestige parts of it, which are the acting conservatory, and those are where the resources go. So we were in a very DIY um, part of the program, which is great because I mean it's awful, and then there are really great parts of it. I think the most talented people I know are the most uh, uh, you know, I think the most clever people I know came out of that and were very ready to be resourceful when it came to making their work and actually creating stuff. Uh, but yeah, it was a fairly figure it out for yourself in terms of the industry stuff. But well, actually, that's not true. Judith Rudikoff very much prepared you for the industry. Very much so, um, and is just a wonderful teacher in many regards, and that being one of them. But I was really making a point to start dipping my toes out into the industry and into the community before I was always very worried about that jump between fourth year and being in the industry, and so I started sort of trying to close that gap while I was in it. Um, so like I was working my sort of I was working a part-time job at Buddies and Bad Times. Um, I was, fairly involved with the um, mid to end of Video Fag. We had started, some friends and I had started producing our own stuff downtown come third year. Like we were really trying to, by the end of it, I was trying to be out and about so that it would feel like my degree had come to a close and it was just time to keep going. But it's sort of a conscious choice you have to make, I think.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because you can wait too. Like you can be like, I should, because sometimes schools frown on that sort of stuff. Like they frown on you. I know the school I went to didn't want us doing too much outside of the school until we were done.
Yeah, I
Um,
think if York had paid any attention to me, they might have, but unfortunately, it was not the case. Um, no, I mean, so I studied, um, it was Michael Gray Eyes and Moynihan King, um, were running the devised theater program at the time, I believe. Um, and very, um, they were very pleased to see me out seeing me at shows, seeing me putting out my own work and sending them invites and stuff. Um, but I think Moynihan has always been the type of artist to just you know find a fucking way to make the thing happen. Um, so they seemed pleased. I know the acting conservatory it was quite a different story.
yeah, it's certainly this is an industry now that sort of needs a lot of people who are, they see a need and they make shit happen, right? This is like what we do now. It's the way that you get started, or even like that can be your whole career. Like I know people who the fringe circuit has essentially been their career, and they're quite
Yeah.
happy with that. You
Yeah.
know. Speaking of fringe and other future endeavors, tell me about Gay for Play. Sorry, Gay for Pay with Blake and Clay.
Gay for Pay with Blake and Clay. It is an acting seminar in which Blake and Clay, two well-seasoned gay actors, teach a room full of straight actors how to convincingly and responsibly play gay roles. Because if they're not going to get cast, I guess it's fine if straight men are, and we'll teach you how. The tagline for this show is "Representation matters," but their representation hasn't called them in ages.
Nice. Nice. Now this show did play at the 2022 Toronto Fringe. So what did you learn about this show at Fringe, and has that changed this show moving forward into its next iteration?
Yeah, quite. There's some pretty big differences. There's been a quick turnaround on the workshopping and development of this show. Um, there is, for anyone who saw it at Fringe, we are now not tethered to an hour-long slot. So we were able to dig quite a bit deeper into Blake and Clay's you know who they are as people,
Hmm.
where they're coming from, on top of the many jokes. And I think I think Daniel Krolik and I, who wrote it together, um, I think we learned to trust the comedic voice that we have together, and that it really works, and that people did really respond to the thing that we were doing. Um, and we learned that sometimes if you're doing it responsibly and you're doing it from your own experience, sometimes you have to just make the damn joke about the thing, be that certain epidemics that have affected the gay community, the queer community, be that the many horrors and traumas that have been inflicted upon us by Canadian politics and the Toronto police force. And sometimes it's you can just make the joke and people will stick with you if it's coming from a real place.
Was that something you were reluctant to do? To go for those jokes, or was that just something like fuck it, let's do it?
Well, the conversation was always, and the conversation is still, with the two of us creating Blake and Clay, because Blake and Clay are we're discovering a bit of a like sort of Ernest Goes to Camp thing with Blake and Clay. Like we think they are now going to become these stock characters that we have many different things we want to do with them. And the conversation was always with those two, only ever joke about something that directly affects the two of us as writers, and that we can speak from our own experience. One, uh, because specificity is always funnier, and two, this I think just don't be shitty. Don't be shitty if you don't need to be shitty. Sometimes you need to be shitty, but if you don't need to be, don't do it. And there was never a there was never a hesitancy with it. There was never a, oh my god, is this going to be a deal breaker for an audience member? Um, because it kept coming back to the fact, like, if it is a deal breaker for an audience member, um, that's their that's for them to deal with. We are just speaking our damn truths, as they have historically been and as they are currently. Uh, and I think Glenn Sumi really got what we were doing, and he said something along the lines of, in his review, you know you're in for a good time when someone in the audience says "whoa," which we usually got about once a show. It was there's a few moments in the show where at least one person in the audience would go "ah," uh, as in "oh my god, I can't believe you just said that." Um, and yeah, it was never there was never, I think we never wrote anything that we couldn't stand by or that we saw as actually harmful. And so there never was a question of like, oh my god, should we pull that back? Um, but yeah, it was always coming from a place of, is this a real thing? Is this a real threat to the queer community? Is this a real, you know, historical issue for us? Then
Mm.
put it in.
Is there any audience participation in this show?
Yeah.
I always feel like it's one of those important questions because the premise sounds like this is like you could have some audience interaction. And some people really dig that, and some people don't.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, what do you, when you were deciding who you were going to target for your audience participation, whether it's like one person or a group of people,
Mhm.
how do you make the decision as to how far to push someone who looks like they don't want to participate, or how do you make the choice of who you're going
Yeah.
to?
I've never been overly interested in a forced audience participation. I just don't think I have any memories of it being a good, like a well crafted moment in a play or a performance. Like it feels like if you can't get, and maybe this is me being horribly pretentious, uh, it feels to me like if you can't get the audience to want to participate in the thing the way that you have curated it and created that moment, then you're not doing your job well, and maybe you're forcing the moment, and maybe you need to workshop this a bit more, because I think the best moments come from not um, forcing the audience to interact, but inviting them to interact in a very active way. Um, so we don't there is no moment of my boyfriend is terrified and nauseous at the idea of audience interaction, and I kind of kept coming back to the idea of like, is this did I create this in a way that he would still have a good time, and that this would not sort of ruin his his enjoyment of the show? Because again, I just don't think it's a very good show if we're all about making the audience uncomfortable, and I don't think anyone who has seen this show would say that they were comfortable for the entire performance. Um, but the way that we created it was we open things up for the audience to participate, and it is more of a group participation, rather than any one person being implicated or instigated. And then on top of that, the invitation that I keep giving to Jonathan Wilson and Daniel Krolik as the performers is they know the show so well. It is such a low tech show. There's no pyrotechnics for them to factor in. There's nothing flying in and off the stage for them to have to, no mark for them to have to hit. This is their show to control, and they know it so well that if at any point an audience member wants to engage, or they want to engage with an audience member, they can go for it. So like when we were doing the Fringe run, we were in the factor the Tarragon Extra Space, which is a small space, lovely space, wonderful space, but small space, and we were very adamant about everybody wearing masks. I don't think you can do a show that at any point talks about AIDS or makes an AIDS joke and still be cool with people being maskless during a pandemic.
Mm.
I think that's a failure on your part. So we were really adamant about that. So at any point during the show, if the boys saw anyone taking off their masks, they are invited to stop the show. Not even stop the show, really, because they can kind of do whatever they want with these characters. To in character, just engage with that person and say like, "I'm sorry, did we not make enough AIDS jokes for you to get the point of like public health is important?" So there's just sort of a baked into the show. There is quite a lot of malleability for them to engage with the audience.
Hmm. Now I have to ask because, of course, COVID's not over. In terms of this show,
Any day now,
the
Phil.
people
Any day now.
I know. It's
Any
gonna.
day
I
now.
can feel it. It's around the corner.
Yeah.
What about how are you dealing with masks, and are you requiring masks for this performance, or was that just a fringe thing?
We are requiring masks for this performance. This is an even smaller house than we had at Fringe.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that folks at the Red Sandcastle are still having they are such a tiny space that they have HEPA filters, but they're like, we're such a small space, you have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
They still get hate voicemails
Cool.
even after all this time. It's
Fun.
great. But
Okay.
it's important that the front of house
Yep.
is prepared to enforce it in
And
a
as
way
the
that I
person who
think
is front of house and enforcing that at
there you
TPM
go.
right now, I am happy to say I'm ready to enforce that, whether I'm, an artist or the person who takes the trash out at the end of the night.
Yeah, no. And that was, I mean, one of my frustrations for Fringe. I don't think it's something that volunteers should have had to deal with, but there were a number of times when I, as an audience member, was frustrated at the abdication of duty of
Yep.
the paid staff of the Fringe,
Yeah.
who just let people who were unmasked walk into a space.
Yeah.
The spaces are so small for the most part that doing so put the artist in danger, and I was appalled to see situations where somebody on the staff would walk by somebody clearly unmasked and just ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been front of house for Fringe, and it was pretty astounding to me how quickly I stopped caring. But
I mean, I get it because you
yeah.
get. I mean, in past years, it's been bad enough when somebody's yelling at you about the latecomers policy.
A
Masks.
beautiful tradition for the Fringe front of house,
Yeah, I
to
know.
be
One that they.
screamed at by
Yeah.
Carol and Craig, who came in from Richmond Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to hold the show for me. Hold the show for me.
You're right, Carol. You're right, Craig. My big issue, my big issue coming out of such unprecedented times was that everybody demanding and sort of bemoaning and speaking such mealy-mouthed eloquence about the importance of live art, and we have to get back into the concert halls, and we have to get back into the live theater and live music. These are the same people who are going on and on about the cultural importance and of these institutions, who then show up maskless and
Yeah.
are the first people to take their masks off once the show start. And
Mhm.
you don't care about the art, because if you did, you would care about the people making it, and
Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah.
And fine, I can't tell you how to feel about that, but how I feel about that is that you're viewing this cultural thing that you just wax so philosophical about as another product that you can purchase, and um y- you know this is a commodity to you. You don't actually care about the cultural exchange happening right now, so please stop acting like you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was one thing when people would go to a movie theater and they would, take off their masks. It was shit. It's one of the reasons I didn't go to movie theaters that often.
Yeah, me
But
either. I saw
it's
Dune and was scared the whole time, and not just by Timothy Chalamet.
No,
So
I
scary.
I only went to, like, small theaters, like, if the room was small, I would go when there was nobody there, and that's the only way I would see movies.
Yeah, I
Because
just
it's
worried that
one thing.
Marvel was gonna, I was like, "Is Marvel gonna be okay without my money? Should I be
I
out
know
there
it's
supporting
so
them?"
hard to know if
It's
Marvel
important for them.
will be
I was
okay.
like, "Is Moon Knight gonna turn it out? Is that gonna be enough? Like, should we be supporting the feature releases? Because I can't just rely on my money watching Oscar Isaac running through the desert with a British accent, you know? These are the things I worried about.
Of course. I mean,
Yeah,
the difference when people take off their masks in the theater is, they're only infecting other audience members who are not gonna be there, which is terrible in itself.
totally, totally,
But
totally.
when
Yeah,
it's in the live theater, and we saw this in New York, in Broadway, when they were open, and audience members, like cast members were, like, out. They're pulling in people who aren't even in that production. They were, like, flying in somebody from the tour from Chicago to cover a role because
yeah,
too many cast members are sick. Like, though
mhm,
every actor during the pandemic, every performer puts their physical health on the
yeah,
line,
yeah.
and audiences,
They're doing it
some
backwards and
people.
in heels, honey.
Mhm.
They're doing it backwards and in heels, and they need you to wear
Mhm.
that mask to protect them. I do think that people who, were so adamant to be maskless are also just very ugly by and large. I think they're very
Mm.
physically unattractive people, and I don't understand their need to uncover their face. You had an out, people. You finally had an out, and you gave it up. You
But
rallied against it.
they decided to give it things like they would say, like, "I don't wanna wear a face diaper." Like, that's the thing that's like, they're even equivalent,
I
like.
know, and they're spewing shit, and that's the irony.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I'm a
for
writer,
sure.
if you couldn't tell.
I can
I
tell.
know, I speak such eloquence, I speak truth to these situations so beautifully. Yeah, it's all infuriating, and I lost my ability to be polite about it quite
Mm.
quickly. Um, yeah.
Um, so the Toronto Fringe finishes. At what point did you decide that you wanted to do another run for Gay for Pay with Blake and Clay?
I think that the heterosexuals hadn't been, educated quite as much as they should have been, unfortunately, because it was such a small house, and tickets did sell out so quickly because we were, a runaway success, um, which, for me is every day, so it truly was just another weekday for me. We we knew that the show had legs, covered these legs were covered in fishnets, they were wearing tap shoes, and they were ready to go. And, we started to poke around, and, eventually we poked, the right. I'm so lost in the weeds of my own metaphor allegory right now.
Mix them
Uh,
up, mix them up.
oh my god. Sometimes you just have to answer the question, Curtis. Um yeah, we pretty much immediately we knew that, there was, we weren't done with this thing, and like I said, there's even more Blake and Clay that we wanna write, um, so we started looking into it pretty quickly.
And you booked the Streetcar Crow's Nest, the smaller of the theaters. I assume the
Yeah, well, we
studio.
didn't
Yeah.
book it,
Oh,
it was yeah, this is the first time in my career that it was not a straight up rental. It was, we are produced in association with Crows. We struck a damn deal.
nice,
Yeah,
nice. That's
it's
great.
wild, I know. Um, I yeah, it's been a wild ride, and we're coming back with a much more in-depth, I think a much more in-depth show. And I think it's gonna be really fun. It's a really fun show, despite all of the politics hanging over it.
What's been the what's it been like working, like, in association with a theater like Crows? Like, as I don't know about you, but I've mostly, like, produced on my own. So,
Yes.
what changes when you're producing in association with a company like Crows?
Well, it's, they were not able to slot us into their season in any, so it is like it's not a it's not a full it's not a rental, but it's also not um a pickup, I guess. I don't so yeah, it is still it's a lot of, Gay for Pay Productions is still um uh putting the coal in the train, and uh oh, good God, one day I'll answer a question without reverting to such basic imagery. Uh yeah, it is a middle ground that we are um you know first experience for me. But we have Rachel Kennedy from the Toronto Theatre Ecology. I'm sure many people know her, who is just whip smart and so savvy, who has been sort of uh teaching me how to bridge that gap of, like, self-producing but with another company sort of involved. And uh yeah, so we have Rachel Kennedy, thankfully.
Mm. Because I mean, it's good that you have that, because it is different, like producing for Fringe and then producing outside of Fringe. They are different animals. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you really do. I I hadn't officially, this was officially my first Fringe play. um and I had been involved in other productions and other bring your own venue shows before. But this was my first, like, it's a play in a venue. I wrote it and directed it. Come on out. So I think, even just today I was like, oh wow, the ease of the Fringe tent. It truly does it really does a lot of work for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you were sending out press releases earlier today. One of the things that I've generally noticed is it is getting harder to get reviews for shows. It's harder to
Yeah.
get media attention
Yeah.
in a landscape, especially with Mooney on theater on hiatus, with the future of Now Magazine in the air. It's
Yeah.
so hard to know any of that. So, uh, what do you like? Do we just like send out press releases to the usual and hope they're coming, or what's the strategy now that that landscape is changing so drastically?
Yeah. I guess my question to the room is it too early to make then jokes when people say now?
No, no,
Have we
it's not.
crossed
It's not. It's
okay,
not.
great.
It's not.
Have we crossed that threshold, I guess, is my question. I yeah, it's I think this sort of it is a weird moment, and I have been sort of like in my own depression about a lot of career stuff lately. But part of it is um I am, I think we all constantly compare ourselves to the generation of theater people who came before us, who were living cheaper and, not living in the hot Anthropocene, the throbbing mess that we find ourselves in currently. And also, could sort of put stuff up quicker and dirtier than we can now. Um, but we have the internet, Curtis. You tell me. I know. Um, so we are kind of constantly comparing ourselves to that, and then even now, constantly comparing ourselves to 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and the sand is really shifting beneath our feet so quickly right now. Um, and it's our approach to it has been to blast all the usual places, work any of the connections that we might have, and Rachel Kennedy knows everybody, so that is a quite the boon. Um, but I don't know. I really wish I had an answer for you that wasn't just like keening and screaming and crying. But I think that is my answer. Uh, I oh, okay. Here's an answer. I have really been leaning further into word of mouth than maybe I would have a few years ago. I've been trying to get like uh internet outreach, like influencer comps, so like people who have a wide internet reach, who are maybe of the gay persuasion and funny. um I have been reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're trying to get funny people out to the show. I've got some media comps that I would love to give your way in exchange for like a tweet of our trailer or our poster, and trying to use the warm our hands on the trash fire that is the internet a little bit more as we all gather around it and watch it burn to the ground. And while you're over there watching the dumpster fire too, I'm going to say, hey, have you heard about Blake and Clay?
Well done, well done. Because I do think I know that lots of artists during this last Fringe really felt the absence
Yeah,
of Moonyon Theater and
yeah.
other media outlets. There was lots of there were plenty of people who were reviewing on Twitter, trash fire that it is, but
Yeah.
um,
I have.
that's sort of it's harder to get a pull quote out of that.
It's harder to
It's
get a pull quote.
it's
And we
harder
also
to
had
find the review.
we also had people. I have bones to pick. Um we had people who had signed up to like have an actual review who showed up late in the run and then sort
Mm,
of just did a tweet when we were like,
right.
hey,
Yeah.
you took media comps from an otherwise sold out run and you didn't give us a review.
Mm,
What's that about? So like even the ones that you can get to show up are
yeah.
stretched so thin that maybe you fall to the bottom of the basket. Um,
Well, it's so
you know,
hard because I mean, Fringe as an artist is quite a marathon. I can only imagine what Fringe as a reviewer is. I remember many years
oh
ago,
yeah,
because I'm an old man, I remember watching the late John Kaplan um,
yeah,
arrive at a show and then leave the show, pull out this massive, they unfolded like a chart, like this big
yeah,
chart that had like this grid of where what he was doing, and then he found where his next show was on that thing, quickly folded that thing up, jumped on a bike, and sped away. And
yeah,
that was his all day, every day for the Fringe.
yeah.
And that kind of dedication is commendable. It's also exhausting.
Can we also talk about the fact that he was somehow managed to just be a lovely and kind person the entire time he did that?
Yes,
I
somehow,
I know. I
somehow
have
he
to do
did
like 2 things in one day, and I'm like, "I am gonna be a bitch to all of you.
it.
This is everyone's fault but mine." And he was somehow just wonderfully charming and kind and, really made it I mean, I'm just, like, giving the monologue that everybody gives about that man, but,
Yeah.
just I think as things get more difficult and more kind of impossible and, you know, uh, as we approach the openings of our own plays thinking, "Oh my god, should I quit theater? Should I move to the mountains and just sort of, um, you know, uh, e e eat the bodies of the many dead hikers that I find, in sort of a scavenging cannibalistic situation? Is that what I should do, Phil? Should I be a cannibal instead of do theater? I think it's important to remind ourselves that, you know, sometimes there are people who are kind and
You
and
know,
women over it.
speaking about how I not knowing how he did it, I have to say that anytime that I have done like a fringe marathon and I've scheduled everything for the day, let's say that doing like I have time, I can from morning until night or whenever the fringe starts, I can see a bunch of shows.
Yeah.
What I always forget to do in my scheduling is schedule time to eat. And so
Oh,
at some
yeah.
point in the afternoon, I realize that I haven't had lunch as my blood sugar crashes, as my mood drops, as everything changes. I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Somehow he managed to go and see all of these shows, be kind
Yeah.
and somehow not have that happen to him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how he does it. If my blood sugar starts to go, I am finding the nearest fainting couch. I'm a Victorian woman bound up in boning and corsets, and you can't tell me that I'm not about to die.
Speaking of Victorian women bound up in corsets, I think that would be the most appropriate transition to speaking about your drag alter ego, Alanis Percocet. Please
Yeah.
tell me about Alanis and how you found her.
That girl showed up at my door one day. She was knocking on I have one of those, like, Marley knockers, and she was just going to town on it, and I was like, "Girl, what?" And she walked right into my apartment, and you know what she said to me? Nothing, she just fainted into my fainting couch. Um,
Nice.
Alanis Percocet is a bearded beauty, drag diva, jagged little thrill of Toronto. Has she ever left my apartment? I don't think she has. Um, I s I had been creating stuff of the, theater performance variety with my friend Merlola Bordeaux, and then this little thing called COVID hit. Um, and it sort of put a damper on some of our plans, just sort of a personal inconvenience that we went through. And Merlola moved to this place called Winnipeg, which I've heard exists. Um, and we had this challenge of like we still wanted to keep creating stuff together. So I started developing my own drag persona to do a doubles act with Merlola. We do a weekly podcast called Lola and Lonnie. It's about two drag queens who have recently moved to a town populated and built by drag queens. Um, it's sort of a Richard Scarry meets John Waters is how I bill it. Um, and we interview local characters. We sort of we'll pick a topic and just sort of go. This week's episode was about dinosaurs. I don't think we once talked about dinosaurs. I think we spent a lot of the episode talking about Clifford the Big Red Dog and his rampage through New York City in last year's Clifford the Big Red Dog film, where it's set in New York. Which we haven't seen it, but based on the trailer, we think is sort of a Godzilla style film. Um,
I'm trying to
so
remember a film version of Clifford the Big Red Dog. Apparently,
exactly,
I don't move in the proper
yeah,
circles to have
yeah,
been made aware of that.
yeah. So if you like podcasts where we talk about Clifford the Big Red Dog's inadvertent murder rampage through New York City, where we talk about Elmo, I was gonna say Elmo the something like Clifford the Big Red Dog, but what is Elmo?
He's a monster. He's a little red monster.
Oh, he's a little monster.
He's a
If you like
monster.
podcasts where people talk about Elmo as if she's Britney Spears circa 2007,
You can't convince
then
me that she's not. You can't convince me that she's not.
well, we recently learned that Elmo, in front of the eyes of the paparazzi, went into a salon and shaved her whole body, red hair everywhere. Red furred creatures was sort of the theme of the episode. Um, so if that is of any interest to you, spoken by two men with full on facial hair who you can't convince are not beautiful, big breasted women, then that's the show for you. Yeah.
I don't see how anyone could resist.
I don't see how anyone could resist. Yeah, I started doing some video drag stuff. I started a YouTube page for Alanis Percocet. I haven't touched it in a while because I'm a huge Fringe success, so I don't have time for YouTube. But I think my last video I talked about Disney gays, Disney adult gays, caring for your Disney gay. I did a video on season 2 of What If, Marvel's What If. I think there was like, what if the Hulk had IBS? What if Captain Marvel teamed up with Rachel Hollis and did a Wash Your Face Girl sort of collab? I basically I just take pop culture things and put them in a blender to my own delight.
I mean, if you can't entertain yourself, who are you entertaining?
Oh, exactly. That's exactly it. But I do think that is that's the thing that Daniel and I keep coming back to as we create Gay for Pay. That was sort of the lesson one of the lessons I had from Fringe this year was, if you're while I am writing comedy, I think the most surefire way for me to write is to have someone that I am trying to make laugh. And having Daniel Krolik on the other end of a Zoom call, trying to make him give me more than I guess that's funny, was sort of the thing that made the script come together for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
And just as we're closing off here, just to make sure that everybody is cleared. So we have Gay for Pay. I keep wanting to insert like the L in anyway. Gay for Pay.
Maybe that'll be one of the many sequels.
Maybe it will.
Yeah.
Gay for Play. Yes.
Gay for Play.
Gay for Pay with Blake and Clay is at Streetcar Crow's Nest from November the 16th to 27th. Is that right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Curtis, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having this conversation with me.
Oh my God, you're so welcome.
This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.